Welcome to the podcast, Jo. I'm so excited to have you. So, I just met you at the Mom Summit in
Mhm.
Nashville a couple weeks ago, and I have been listening to your podcast Under the Influence for years. I think I started when you first started putting out the episodes. So I don't know if that's been like 3 or 4 years, but yeah, I've been listening from the beginning before I was even a creator, and I'm just obsessed with you. So I can't
No.
wait to talk to you more about your podcast. We're going to talk about Trad Wives. We're going to talk about your new book that was just released in the last month, the Sicilian Inheritance. So welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. This is so much fun. Yeah, it's been 4 years, which I only know
Ooh.
that because my daughter is 4 years old. And I started reporting and making this podcast when she was an itty bitty, like a freshy baby. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, this podcast is a 4-year-old now, which, we took a little break. But when I started it, I thought it was going to be 8 episodes. And now it's like 100 and something, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, but I think it really does. Under the Influence, the podcast speaks to the fact that we need to be covering social media the same way that we cover celebrities or any other media because it has more influence than almost anything else in people's lives at this point.
Yeah, well, and I had mentioned like started listening to your podcast before I was even a creator. So I've been posting on Instagram for like about a little over 3 years after my second daughter was born. And so you really kind of got me interested in that world. And my listeners know this, but I'm from Utah, so there are a lot of influencers here. My
Yeah.
sister-in-law was an influencer, is an influencer, and so I kind of saw like what she was doing on her end, and then I just feel like I'm surrounded by them. And then
Yeah.
hearing on your
You
side
live
and how
in
you're
ground
reporting.
zero is what you do. You live in
Yes.
ground zero. Mhm.
Feels like everyone's an influencer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just growing up in like this perfectionism, with like the Utah culture and the church and everything like that. I'm like, oh, I get this. So it was very interesting to me to listen to your deep diving and kind of how it all started. And now I'm here in the creator space, but I feel like I'm like a little bit of like a Jack influencer. They call like Jack Mormons. Like if you're not like fully Mormon, but like you
Mhm.
go to church, but you still drink alcohol and like drink coffee. So it's like, I feel like I'm like a Jack influencer where I don't really like fit into that space, but I'm here. So
But you're here. But you're here. I
I'm
mean,
here. I'm
yeah.
trying.
Well, I mean, what does this space even mean is the thing, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm working on a new nonfiction book called The Expectation Gap. Yes, the internet is making you hate your life, and it's not your fault. And I only started working on this literally a week ago. I had the idea and I'm like, oh, that's the nonfiction book that I want to write. But I do think that looking at all of these picture perfect images, many of which were Mormon influencers in the beginning and still are, uh, is making us feel like shit.
Yeah.
And the more we talk about it, the more we talk about how that's not their real life. It's certainly not. So much of it is photo shoots. When we were in Cleveland for the eclipse, the house that we were staying in was so like just stock central casting influency. Like, perfect white kitchen, lots of sculptures that said grateful and, love my life. And like all of the cups said things
Live,
like,
laugh, love.
live, laugh, love. All of the cups said things like, you may think this is coffee in this mug, but it's really champagne. And I found out it's because it's an actual rental that rents by the hour for influencers. Mostly, it used to rent to commercials, like regular commercials, but now they rent to influencers by the hour so that influencers can
Wow.
create content. So a lot of times when we're looking at influencers, we're not even seeing their actual house.
That is wild to me
I know.
that people will rent a house and people assume that it's their home and it's not.
Of course, of course. And I mean, that's the part of the smoke and mirrors of most of these influencer campaigns. They never tell you it's their house, but we assume it is because we're in our house
Right.
with
Yeah.
our phones. And so, yeah, I think like just pulling back the curtain and telling people, no, like the expectation gap is bullshit. You see these clean kitchens, you see your kitchen, which is not clean. That the gap between those two things gives you anxiety and it makes you think that you're failing at life, makes you hate your own life. And no, it's because the other thing does not really exist.
Yeah. So is that kind of what got you into or interested in doing these deep dives into influencing, is just kind of like that perfect aesthetic feed that they have and these perfect images, or what got you interested in that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I got very interested in mom influencers when I had my second baby. When I had my first baby almost 7 years ago, mom influencers were not as big of a thing. Or at least I wasn't being served them constantly. My second baby did not sleep. She was up all night long, and I was up holding her and rocking her, and the only appendage that I had free was my thumb. And so I would constantly scroll Instagram, which was bad, but whatever. Who's to tell you what is bad when you have a screaming infant and you haven't slept in weeks? And I was being served mom influencers on a very regular basis. These women who were wearing perfect white linen dresses in their beautiful, spotless houses with their very clean children. And here I was, covered in pee and breast milk and puke in my messy ass house, surrounded by dirty laundry. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? I come from the world of magazines and celebrities. And so I know very well how media is created, and it made me want to investigate this world. Was this these people's real life? Was this a business? Like, how did all of this work? And that's how I started Under the Influence. I really wanted to pull back the curtain on influencing, but since then it's gotten so much bigger than I think any of us ever could have imagined. I mean, this multi-billion-dollar business is insane, and more commerce happens on social media than happens pretty much anywhere else at this point. And we're being influenced in our ideas and our beliefs. And
Yeah.
so I do think it's very important to cover influencers the way we would cover anyone else who had power.
Yeah, that resonates with me so much because when I had my first daughter's 6, she's almost 7, so this was back in 2017. I and like growing up in Utah, like I said, like
Mm-hmm.
my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my mom was just like the Mary Poppins of motherhood. Like she just did it all. She had 6 kids, she had them back to back. We're all about like 2 years apart. And that's just like the culture that I live in, is like this image of like perfectionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I had my first daughter, I was expecting it to be easy because my mom made it look easy and everyone around me made it look easy. And no one told me that it's actually a shit show. Like,
Yeah.
especially with your first, because you have no idea. Your life is turned upside down. You have complete freedom, and then the next second you have zero freedom, right? My
Mm-hmm.
daughter had colic for 3 months, so she wasn't sleeping either. I was up with her all night doing the same thing that you were doing with your daughter, scrolling Instagram.
Yeah.
And I was being fed all of those perfectionism pictures of women who had just had babies like me, but they looked amazing.
Yeah.
They were
Amazing.
breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, they looked gorgeous. Like they're just looking at their husbands, loving their husbands. And I'm like, I hate you, to my husband at the time, like, get away from me. So I can relate to that 100%. And it definitely affected my experience and made me feel like something was wrong with me and that I wasn't meant to be a mom. And come to find out, like, my experience was very normal, what I
So
was
normal.
experiencing.
So normal.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think that mom content has been so sanitized in the past couple of years that we are made to feel like we're mothering badly or wrong.
Yeah.
And the truth is that Instagram promotes that. The algorithm loves pretty pictures. When it was created, the founders wanted it to be a digital Vogue. Like, the like young
Yeah.
male founders who like to fuck models. Oh my God, it's so shocking that they want it to be pretty and glossy. Oh.
Right.
Um, Again, just thinking about where these things come from and who makes them, and now what kinds of advertising dollars are fueling this. Like, again, it's
Yeah.
just a magazine. But also, I feel like women were scared to share that they didn't love motherhood, because culturally we've been told you're supposed to love this. You're supposed to love your baby the second they come out of your body. A lot of the myths that we've been told about motherhood, and I was talking to Amanda Montai of the book Touched Out about this on the podcast the other day, were written by men. Like, a lot of the
Yeah.
cultural narratives about motherhood were written by men who were never home with their children. And then when we do say what it's really like, or when we do say things we really do, other mothers attack us online. I had the craziest shit happen to me this week. Fun because I don't post my kids that much online anymore.
Yeah.
And I think, it should be an educated decision for everyone. I think there should be legislation around like protecting children online. I think we should know better what happens to children's pictures. Knowing
Right.
everything I know, I don't post them as much as I used to. Just don't. But they're still on there sometimes because they are a part of my life and they're fucking cute. And so sometimes I post them. And so there were maybe like one or two stories. I try not to put them on the grid where my baby was in a diaper and like running around. She's a baby, like a baby baby. And someone was like, why don't you put pants on your baby?
Oh my God.
Why's your baby never wearing pants? And I'm like, I mean, that was funny, right? So I posted about that and I wrote about it. But then one of my Substack followers actually had the balls to email me with the subject, not to give you parenting advice, but, and in the body
Oh
of the
no.
email, you really shouldn't be posting your kids. Do you follow Mom Uncharted on Instagram? Because she's got some good advice about it. I'm like, she's been on my podcast many, many times. And
You're like, I'm friends with her. So
I
yes.
am friends with her. In fact, she's reading The Sicilian Inheritance right now. And I wrote that back and she's like, well, then I've lost all respect for you. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? This is why women don't
Yeah.
say what we really do. Like, we don't say that, like, we let our kids run around naked or that we give them soda sometimes or that we
Right.
don't breastfeed because there's always, like, some other woman is always going to criticize us. It's such bullshit.
Yeah, I get that all the time because I do post a lot of like honest motherhood things and talk about my experience in that I don't always love motherhood. I love my kids. I wouldn't
Yeah,
change them for anything, but sometimes things are just really shitty, like dealing with these tantrums or bedtime battles. Like those things suck, right? And
they
I get
suck.
comments,
Yes,
yes, they're the worst. And it's
the worst.
like, yeah, two things can be true at the same time, but I get comments like that from people or DMs like, you hate being a mom, you're a bad mom, you weren't meant to be a mom. Like, all you do is bitch and complain. And it's like, okay, go
No,
away.
go
Like, this is just
away. I
reality. This is
mean,
how we
yeah.
all feel.
This is how
Okay.
we all feel. And I mean,
Yes.
yeah, it was actually very difficult for me, like, not to give some choice words to that woman who was like, not to give you parenting advice. You're giving me parenting advice, you stupid bitch. I was
That's
like,
never going to end well if you start a sentence out like
never
that.
gonna end
Never.
well. Never. But yeah, and I get that too. Like when I complain about motherhood because it's
Yeah.
hard. We would never say that to a man complaining about his
No.
job. We wouldn't be like, you shouldn't have a job. You shouldn't
Right.
work. Like maybe you're not cut out for this. But because it's motherhood, it's supposed to be this very special thing. It is labor. I love my kids. One of my kids just came up here and interrupted my last interview. And I was like, get her the fuck out of my room. Like, my God, love her, but I'm allowed to be annoyed because
Right.
mothering is hard. And this is a real cultural moment where we have decided to whitewash motherhood and make it look perfect and make it look beautiful. And I think the trad wives are an example of that.
Yeah.
They take the labor out of it, is what they do, and that's my biggest issue with them. I have a lot of issues with them. I don't like the idea that women are submissive to their husbands, that women give up their agency over their own lives. But my biggest issue is they remove the labor. They make it look like this is easy. And
Yeah.
I think it is hoodwinking a generation of young women who are easily influenced by these aspirational images to think that motherhood should and does always look like this.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about trad wives. So I know very little
Mhm.
about trad wives. I've done a little bit of research. I know you talk about it. And I know there's, these big accounts like Ballerina Farms, and there's another one that I actually thought was satire. And she actually seems really sweet.
Is it
Um,
Lex Della Rosa?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I actually
yeah.
thought it was satire. And I think maybe a little bit is
She plays
yeah,
off.
but
Yeah.
apparently she is a trad wife. But I mean, what's the difference between a trad wife and a stay at home mom? Because I'm a
Oh,
little
yeah.
confused, and I know that some people have asked me that, and I don't really know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get attacked for this a lot because people are like, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Why do you all of you feminists hate stay-at-home moms? And again, I'm like, shut up. I love stay-at-home moms. Stay-at-home moms are the CEOs of their household. They are working their asses off. The difference between a trad wife and a stay-at-home mom, I mean, the idea of the trad wife is very rooted in evangelical Christianity. It is this idea that the man is the boss. The man controls the household. The man makes the money, but he doesn't just make the money, he makes all the decisions regarding the money. That the woman is submissive to the man. That is not a stay-at-home mom. Like, this trad wife thing is very separate from stay-at-home mom. It is a woman who is completely submissive to her husband, who does her hair for him, who dresses for him, who does not leave the house without asking his permission. But so many stay-at-home moms have felt attacked by the trad wife situation when people are condemning trad wives, that I think that's almost the point of it sometimes. It's that, you know, we want people to identify as this one thing, and then band together with the trad wives who are submissive and who have given up their agency. And we know that's a bad idea. We know that having no control over your life or your own money is never a great plan. Men die, men cheat, men leave.
Right.
And I mean, it's just like, this is a true thing. And I've interviewed so many former trad wives, again, not a stay-at-home mom, but someone who just like, a woman who didn't go to college because her husband told her not to, because her husband said, no, your only job is to be in the home, who had no idea how much money was in their bank accounts. That is not a healthy relationship. And we do see a lot of this online, and it's packaged very beautifully. You know, the women are beautiful in a certain sense. The women are very well coiffed. Their hair and their makeup is always done. It's the opposite of what I fucking look like right now.
Right.
I mean, I was just very proud of myself that I went to a bar class this morning, and I have not showered since, but I went to a bar class this morning. I did it, and I'm in my stinky Madonna t-shirt. A trad wife would never look like this on camera, and then let it be broadcast to the world. But yeah, so we're seeing more and more of it, again, because the Instagram algorithm loves beautiful, aspirational, glossy images, and this delivers. And so they go viral. We also know that they are being boosted by many conservative forces who are very in favor of women leaving the workforce and going back to work solely in the home, but not just to work solely in the home, but to be dependent on the men in their home. And, you know, I've compared it very recently to what we saw happen. You know, during World War II, there was the big push with Rosie the Riveter to get women into the workforce because so many men were fighting. And I've been thinking about this for a while and talking about it. And then Margaret Atwood actually echoed it at a talk that I was at the other day. And afterwards, there were massive campaigns to get women back into the home so the men could work again. During the 80s and 90s, we saw such a rise of the girl boss and leaning in. And now, you know, we see a lot of unemployed men who feel badly about themselves. And I think that this is a reaction to that, to try to get women, you know, pull them back. They did too much. They have too much power now. Pull them back, rein them in. And it feels very similar to what we saw, you know, just under 100 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like the difference really between like a stay-at-home mom and a trad wife is like you don't really have like agency, and you have someone who's like telling you what you can and can't do, that you can't get a job, even if you want it. Right. Okay. So I think that's the biggest takeaway and the difference there. So that's really eye-opening. So like I said before, my mom was a stay-at-home mom of 6 kids.
So many kids.
Yeah, so many kids. And that was normal, you know, back 20, 40 years ago or whatever, right? So especially in Utah. But she chose to stay home. They're very traditional, you know, Mormon, LDS, but she chose to stay home. She wanted to stay home with her kids. But what ended up happening is after 23 or 24 years of marriage, my parents got divorced. And I saw, you know, kind of what happened with my mom. And I mean, yeah, she got like, you know, half their assets and they split that and all that. But like what ended up happening to her, she hadn't been in the workforce for 25 years. She had a college degree, but it didn't mean anything at that point. Plus, she had her kids the majority of the time because 25 years ago, it wasn't common to do 50-50 custody. So we went with my dad every other weekend. So my mom was a single mom who, you know, had to drop us off at school, pick us up, run us around. And that doesn't really work in like corporate world. Like I work in corporate, and I mean, it's a pretty strict 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and it just doesn't work with raising kids. So there's like so many layers of like what could potentially happen if you do choose that. Yes, my mom chose that life, and that's totally different than like a trad wife, but I'm always like hesitant, that's like there's a lot of risks that come with that. Divorce rates are really high. I'm divorced. I've been divorced for a year and a half now, and luckily I've have a way to support myself financially with my job and those types of things. But to really give up like that agency and not be
Mhm.
on, not know where your money is, not be on the bank accounts or the loans or anything like that, there's just so much risk with that. And personally, I would never want my daughters to do something like that. I'd be worried.
No, no. I mean, I don't want to model this for girls, right? Or boys. I mean, whatever. I don't want to model it for anyone. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing with these influencers is intense modeling, because I have spoken to so many young women who are like, why would I want your life? Your life looks crazy. You're exhausted all the time. You're
Right.
working constantly. I just want to do nothing. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
girl. Oh, God. Because, I mean, fine. Again, like, as feminists, we're supposed to give people choices, but we live in a world, we live in capitalism. Okay, you have to make money to support yourself, to pay your bills, to pay your health insurance, to just like function in this fucking world. So these ideas going around on Instagram about, I'm a stay-at-home girlfriend, I'm a trad wife, I let my husband control everything, they make it look pretty, and there are young women actually being influenced by this to not get an education, to not get work experience, to not manage their own money. And they will, 99% of them will wind up sorely disappointed and in danger of not being able to have anything to support themselves.
Yeah. That's really scary, honestly, to think about. Because I mean, like we've said, like Instagram is not reality. Even people who aren't like trad wives, like you don't see the full story of what's really going on. Even like the best of intent, the people have the best of intentions to show that. Like there's just so much you can show in even a 90-second clip, but most clips are not that long on social media, right? So I think portraying like this image of perfectionism and that life is easy. I even know my stay-at-home mom friends, even just being a stay-at-home mom, like it's hard.
It's
Like
hard.
and
It's
I
fucking
don't think
hard.
I don't think I could do that. But then add on the layers of like all these expectations that you have from your partner, where you have to have a home cooked meal every day. You have to be homeschooling your kids. You have to look a certain way at all times, to be accepted. Those types of things. Just adding all of that on, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure for women.
It's a lot of pressure. I mean, and that
Yeah.
is, I mean, social media simply just creates more and more pressure and anxiety for women, is what it does.
Yeah. And I wonder if it must come from like a place of like, that's where the appeal comes from, is like a place of like burnout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing like it looks easy, and why would I want this stressful corporate job while I'm trying to balance being a mom and being an entrepreneur when I could just be at home wearing dresses and being with my kids all day, right?
Right.
It
But I
looks
mean,
easy.
it looks easy. And again, it strips the labor from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow. Well, what do you think is like the solution to like this trad waves problem, where we just ride the waves?
I mean, again, we can ride the wave of every social media trend that's out there. I think education is just super important. I mean, talking about it, dissecting it, sometimes poking fun at it, right? Just like not taking all of this at face value. And that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast, the newsletter, and like maybe this book that I'll end up writing, is to say, hey, look at this the way you looked at a magazine. Like looking at Vogue used to make me like, I liked it because it's aspirational. Also, it made me like feel like I had no money because everything's expensive, but and made me feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to be as thin and pretty as these models. But I knew they were models. That's the thing.
Right.
I knew they were fucking models. And like, we're hoodwinked into believing on social media that these are all real people and not brands and not creators, and that there's no smoke and mirrors. And so just kind of peeling back the curtain and thinking about it like that, I'm never going to tell anyone to get off social media full stop or to get rid of their phones. I know that Jonathan Haidt is doing that in the Anxious Generation book. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen. Okay. The train has left the station. And so it's like, how do we manage our own anxiety and stress? What guardrails should the government be doing to try to regulate these industries, which there's none right now, and pushing for those? And then, also creating media literacy in our kids. I don't like YouTube. It's a cesspool of shit. But sometimes there are good things that I want my kids to like look up on YouTube, right? But I'm very clear in my house about what I think about YouTube. We call it poop tube. I'm like, it's full of crap, guys. It's just like mostly crap that like morons are making to try to make money. But I'm like, but sometimes there's this NASA guy who makes a squirrel maze, and that's amazing. If we didn't have that talk, I think they would get sucked into the constant mindless scroll. Like I explain this to my 6-year-old. I'm like, it's going to keep giving you videos, and it's going to keep giving you videos that you won't be able to stop watching. I'm very
Right.
clear about that now. And I think as parents, we have to be very clear about this as media, as social media, as their primary form of media. My kids, like, they see me read newspapers because we still get a newspaper in our house, but not nearly as much as, like, I saw my parents read a newspaper, and we don't have cable. So they don't see cable news. They don't see news shows.
Yeah.
When I'm staring at my phone, they don't know what I'm doing.
I think that's really interesting. So I am listening to the Anxious Generation as well. And I posted a video on social media yesterday that's basically like, hey, let's just make a pact that we're just not going to give our kids phones till they're like 16, because it's
Mhm.
causing me a lot of anxiety, like thinking about, my 6-year-old's already been asking for a phone. She's 6. She's
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
kindergarten,
Same,
right?
same. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, okay, how do I navigate this? Is like something I'm looking, at right now, as a parent, but it's kind of divided. Some people, are really, I would say most people don't, want to give their kids phones, but then also it's like, it's a reality of our life,
But
right?
then
And we need to
everyone
be in
else
communication.
does. But then everyone
Yeah.
else does. That's the thing. And we do need to be in communication. But do we have to be in communication as much as we are? I mean, I didn't have a cell phone. I had a beeper,
Right.
useless beeper that, beeped, and then you had to go find a payphone somewhere. Like, what the fuck was that? It's the stupidest thing that existed in technology. I mean, like as stupid as like the fax machine. But I I was on that bandwagon too for a long time, and I don't know where I'm at with this. Like, I feel very
Yeah.
comfortable saying I don't know. Like, I want to, try to figure this out and stumble as I go along. But I was with my friends, slightly older daughters, also for the eclipse when we were in the weird influencer rent by the hour house, and they're I think 13, 11, and 9ish, and they had phones, and they used phones in such awesome, like they're just like good kids and used phones in such awesome ways that I was like, that's amazing. So like,
Yeah.
they're doing Duolingo to study Mandarin, and they were like aces at Canva, such that I had all the kids, we were in a parking lot with a bunch of chalk, and they spelled out Eclipse 2024 with their bodies. Um,
Oh, cute.
and then the girls like helped me make the backgrounds disappear for this big poster that we wanted to make. They used technology in like a really cool way. And so I'm like, those kinds of things are awesome. I do think social media is very, very dangerous. And so how
Yeah.
do we put the brakes on that? But can kids use these cool parts of technology that are great for learning and school and communicating? Like, again, the industry is fucked, and the industry does create terrible things that, like, children can get a hold of. That said, what else was terrible when I was 12? Three-way calling. Three-way calling.
You didn't like that? You didn't like calling two of your friends being on the
Well,
phone all at the same time?
well, no, I love that, but like you would always use it to call Cindy to find out what she thought about Stacy, and then Stacy
Right.
would pretend not
Yeah.
to be on the phone because teenage girls are dicks.
Yeah.
So I have such mixed feelings about all of it that I'm like, I would love to completely take all technology away from my kids. But I don't think we can. I don't know if it's going
Right.
to be possible. And so if it's not possible, how do we live with it?
Right.
And I think that that's probably the place where we're going to have to go.
Yeah. Well, and I think about kind of going back to like Tradwives a little bit. Like if I'm a 34-year-old woman, my brain is fully developed and I have a hard time like regulating, or, I'm comparing my lives to like these perfect images on social media. Like, what is that going to do to like a 13 or 14-year-old brain when they get on there and they see
Mm-hmm.
this type of content? Like, if I can't do it, or if
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult for me, I mean, imagine what it's going to be like for someone 20 years younger than me. So,
Yeah.
definitely something like to think about. Yeah, and I haven't finished the book. I don't know what the answer is either, but it's just like a good thing to be thinking about, I think, as parents.
Yeah. And I think we have to constantly think about it and talk about it, and also not feel shame about how we do it. Again, it's like the
Right? Yeah.
shame and the judgment. Like, oh, you let your kids watch screens. I'm like, yes. I do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I
and
do
we do
like,
screen time too, but
yeah, my kids
yeah,
watch a lot of
it's,
television. They watch a lot of television.
yeah, mine too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but I see good things. Like we do a lot of family movie nights, which has been awesome. My kids watch very inappropriate movies. We've watched all of Jurassic Park, the
Oh,
entire franchise, which just, I mean, it brings them so much joy. And we really do not mince words about life and death in this house anymore. Also Star Wars, but we like, I have great conversations with my children about these
yeah.
things, and it's awesome. uh and I also recently, I do not mind them watching certain cartoons with like friend social groups in them, because I think that that's how I learned to socialize, partly like through watching like Saved by the Bell and like TV shows with friends on
Oh,
them.
uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so like my kids have recently been watching like Magic School Bus. And it's like, kids
Oh,
who are friends with
forgot
each
about that
other. It's a
show.
good show. It's really good.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
that brings me back.
but they like the friend interactions. They
Yeah.
like to watch that because I think they need to see it modeled how to be a friend. And so like TV shows like that I think are great. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we're all just plodding through this together and trying to figure out how to do it, and creating a more judgment-free zone, I think, is very important. I mean, I do not judge individuals. I judge influencing brands very harshly, and there's a difference. I judge
Yeah.
the brand of Ballerina Farm. I do not judge Hannah Nealman, but Ballerina Farm is a
Okay.
brand with 9
Yeah.
million followers. It is a media company and should be spoken about as such. It is not just, I do not judge this woman, but I do think that the brand makes some decisions that make women feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, you know what I also think is interesting about trad wives is that, I think that they're promoting this life that you stay at home, you're a woman, you stay at home with your kids, you raise them, homeschool them, all these things, but they're actually making a lot of money,
Making a lot of money
which
and
is
not
kind
talking
of
about it. Mhm.
contradictory to what they are preaching other women to do, but they're making a lot of money.
Yeah, it's not kind of contradictory. It's
Yeah,
contradictory. Yes.
yeah, it is contradictory.
It's
Yeah,
they're actually pretty much lying is the
yeah.
thing.
Well, it is a
And
full-time job being a creator. Like I know even on my small level in comparison, like it's a
yes,
lot of work.
being a creator is so much work. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been going full steam ahead for the Sicilian Inheritance as a creator online because that is how we sell books these days. And
Yeah.
I'm exhausted and totally burnt out. And that's why I look like this right now.
But you went to bar class, so
I went to bar class.
so let's talk about the Sicilian Inheritance. So I'm listening
Oh,
to it right now. I'm halfway through.
oh nice.
So this is this number 4 for you, the fourth book?
12. 12
12.
books. Yes.
Dang.
They're not even all on my website. Like I'm so bad about updating my website. Like another thing that in another
Wow.
life I would have more time to do. No, I've written 12 books in about 13 years, I think. I started when I was 29. I'm 43. Yeah.
Wow.
Um
Well, and you have 3 kids.
and there's
So
3 kids. Yeah.
yeah, how I want to know. I mean, how did you write a book with 3 kids and one is a baby?
Yeah. Well, writing books is the easy part for me. I was a newspaper reporter for a very long time. I can just sit down and write. Like that is not an issue at all. Like I can sit down, bang out copy and get it done. The hard part is like the selling and the publicity and the going on book tour. Like that has really beaten me down in the past 2 months, to which I'm just like, oh wow, I'm really at my limit for what I can do.
Yeah.
But I also have full-time childcare. And I talk about that all the time because, I am, like, many times it does cycle back and forth, but there are many times when I am the breadwinner in our family, and I make more money than my husband. Writing and creating content, podcasts, and books is my full-time career. And I think a lot of times people look at jobs like that as a hobby, or something that you should do only in your spare time. And it's how we support our family. So I have full-time childcare to be able to do that. That's how I get it done. I'm
Yeah.
not waking up at 5 a.m. I don't like the narrative of the woman who wakes up at 5 a.m. to like get it done before her kids wake up. Because I think it just feeds into the, as mothers, we must sacrifice.
Right.
As mothers, we must not care for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, every time I wake up before my kids, try to be like that early riser, get it all done, my kids just somehow know I'm awake. And
They
then
know.
then
They
they
know.
wake up.
They
I'm
smell
like,
you.
how did you? I
Smell
was
you.
being so quiet. It's 5
Yeah.
a.m. Like, what? And then I'm up
Yeah.
at 5 a.m. with my kids, and
That
it's a
sucks.
nightmare.
Sucks.
Yes.
That's terrible. That is
Yeah.
awful. Yeah. So I mean, I have a lot of support. I have a husband who's very supportive, and like a great network of people that I work with. So been able to get it done. The Sicilian Inheritance is the best thing that I've ever written. I love it so much. It's an adventure murder mystery. It's an awesome beach read. It's just hitting all the beach read lists right now, which are coming out now that it's May, and everyone's like, let's think about the beach, which is great. And it's loosely based on a real life murder in my own family. And, it's about a woman traveling to Sicily to try to claim a family inheritance and eating a lot of delicious food, solving a family murder mystery, and having sex in a beach cave.
Well, and I like the way that you formatted it because it goes back and forth between two different times. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really like keeping me interested because I'll like end a chapter, and then I'll want to like almost like skip ahead because I want to know what happens, but then, you listen through to see what happens on the other side of that. Where did you come up with that idea?
Well, I knew that I wanted to tell the story of a woman in the past when, in 1910, when her husband leaves for America to build his fortune and she's left alone. I mean, a million women were left alone in Sicily during this time period. There were entire villages ruled by women. And so they took jobs. They started to read and write and run businesses. They bought land. They lent money. They became doctors, like the character in my book. But, anytime that women get power in history, it's very dangerous. And I think we can directly link that to, again, what we're seeing with trad wives and women working outside the home. These women in Sicily were able to get jobs for the first time in their lives when their husbands came to America. But then when they had to join their husbands in America, they went right back into the house.
Mm,
Like all
yeah.
of the power, all of the skills that they had acquired meant nothing when they came to join their husbands. And we saw that again, World War II. And now we're seeing it with a lot of women who were leaning in and were girl bosses. But now,
Yeah.
it's like, no, we should all lean out. It's time for us to lean out. And I just think there's parallels. So I wanted to have this past timeline. But in a lot of historical fiction, I love some historical fiction. I hate other historical fiction. I think a lot of it reads very old timey and not fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, no, no. My characters in 1910 are fun as hell. They're funny. They're
Yeah.
having a blast. They're having like steamy sex. I wanted the whole book to feel like an adventure, but I want you to feel a little bit smarter walking away from it because I also think that there's a lot of books out there that are like fun and steamy, but like you feel kind of dumb after you read them.
Right. I can think of a couple of them.
Just a couple.
Won't name
Just a
them.
couple. I don't name people. I don't. I
Yeah,
don't
I don't
name
name.
people. No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the book, do you find out, is it based on fact? Do you actually find out who murdered or
You
did you
find
make that?
out. Oh, at the end of
You
the book,
do
you find.
find out truly what
Well,
happened.
no. So I wrote the book.
Okay.
I wrote the book without finding out the real story of
Okay.
how my great great grandmother was murdered. I took this nugget. We knew that she was murdered in Sicily in this time period, and I ran with it. I did a ton of research, but no research into my own family while I was writing the book. So in the
Okay.
book, I imagine what could have happened to her. And the ending of the ending of the Sicilian Inheritance is a real banger. It's a real banger. I didn't know what it was
I
when I
can't
started
wait.
writing. And then I want to hear what you think when you're done.
Yeah,
But
I'll
when that was finished, because I'm an incredibly thorough content creator, I decided to solve the murder in real life. So
Oh,
I have been going back to Sicily and created a true crime podcast, also called The Sicilian in Real Life. And so, yeah, I mean, you'll have to listen to find out, but there are some
okay.
real doozies in there that we have discovered that happened to my real life great great grandmother. And we're figuring it out. It's like, I call it White Lotus meets Only Murders in the Building meets Bluey because my kids are there.
That one threw me.
Yeah, because well, I mean,
Wait.
they're helping me solve this murder, is what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're not helpful at all, but they're present. They're always there with me, and yeah, it's a great ride. It's an adventure, and it's people are really liking it. It's great. I mean, it feels amazing. I've been hearing from people, hundreds of people a day at this point, who are like, I devoured the book. I devoured the Sicilian Inheritance overnight. And I'm like, that's all I want. I just want you to like eat it up like candy and then book a trip to Sicily.
I want to go to Sicily and I love White Lotus. I mean, that's an
I
amazing
know.
show. I'm like, I
Yeah,
have to go there. Is that where it was shot in Sicily?
it
Because it
was. It
looks
was
beautiful.
It was shot in Sicily. It was shot in
Okay.
Taormina. Yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
the goal
Sold.
is obviously to get all White Lotus fans to be reading this book right now. Like
Yeah.
we just have to find them, because once they know this book exists, they're going to want to read it.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your podcast, the true crime podcast, The Sicilian Inheritance, is that out?
It is. It is. There's
It is
I
out.
think there's
Okay.
5
Okay. I'm going to have to
episodes
listen.
out. It's really good. It's really good. I mean,
Okay.
it's we we have a whole production crew that are very good at this, and that we spent, like, they spent a lot of money, and I'm like, wow, money makes podcasts sound really good.
Who would have
Just like,
thought?
who would have thought? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I know this because I worked with iHeartRadio for so long, but yeah, it's very well produced. My producer was in Sicily with me last summer with the kids, and so yeah, it's about finding your roots and finding unexpected things, and the stories that we tell ourselves about our family and how that shapes our identity.
I'm going to have to give it a listen. I'm going to go follow and binge it.
Oh yeah, go binge
Um,
it. I mean, it really is a delight. It is.
yeah. Well, Joe, before I let you go, I do want to know. So the name of my podcast is I Didn't Sign Up for This.
Yeah.
I want to know, what is one thing that you did not sign up for?
I didn't sign up for having my body just taken over at all times. And I think about this a lot because I took my husband to Puerto Rico for his 50th birthday last week, and I was super excited to have sex with him again. And it's because I wasn't being touched all the time by 3 children. And again, Amanda Montai, I just had her on the podcast, so I'm really thinking about this. She wrote this great book called Touched Out, about how we lose agency over our bodies when we have kids. And I didn't expect that there to be a limit on how much I could be touched and just, taken over physically by my kids. But it's true. I'm like, I really do need like bodily autonomy at the end of the day, because my kids have been they literally try to climb back into my body on a regular
Right.
basis. Like, they want back inside. And I love them and I want to hug them and cuddle them, but the physicality of motherhood is what I was very surprised about.
Yeah. I can relate to that 100%. Like, just always being touched out and them crawling on me. My 4-year-old, or almost 4-year-old, she still wants to sit on my lap when we're eating dinner. And I'm
Same,
like,
same, same, same. Yeah, yeah.
Get off me. Like,
I want
let
to
me
eat
just
food.
eat. You're
Let me just
4.
eat.
Like, come
Yeah,
on. Like, come on. Yeah. I can
yeah,
totally relate with
yeah,
that.
yeah. It's like
Yeah.
constant. Well, and it's interesting because my first two, my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old, it's a boy and then a girl, and they're like, there was no jealousy between them. The 2 girls, there's a lot, even though the youngest girl is just a baby. So if one is on my lap, the other one wants on my lap.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it is. So then I have 2 babies on my lap.
Oh, man. And they don't
Yeah.
want dad.
No,
You
no,
can't hand him off to dad. It's like, and then you hate
no,
him because of it, even though it's not his fault.
they don't want him. They just don't want him. Okay. They just, like I said, well, although, with baby 3, I have really ceded more duties to him than ever before. He does get up in the middle of the night. I don't get up in the middle of the night ever
Oh,
anymore.
nice.
I refuse to, because like, I'm a mess if I don't have sleep, and I don't go back to sleep. He does. He has like a hair trigger. And also, they don't want him. So if he goes into their
Yeah.
room and he shows up, if they're like crying or yelling, they're like, oh, all right,
It didn't work.
I'll go back to bed. But if it's me, they're like, hi,
Yeah.
it's us
Sleep in here
time.
with me. It's
It's
us
us
time.
time, isn't it? And I'm like, no, no, mm-mm. Even the baby, because he usually puts the baby to bed. And last night she was crying, so I went in there, and it was just like, she's handing me board books,
Mm,
and then I try to leave, and she's screaming. He goes in, nothing. She's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Why is it that way? It's got to
I don't know.
be
I don't know.
maybe because we
So much
carry
love.
them or something.
So
Yeah.
much
So
love.
much
Yes,
love.
because they're physically attached to our bodies. They are
Yeah.
physically attached to our bodies. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining the podcast. And I'll put everywhere that you can find Joe, I'll link her book in the
Yay.
show notes. You can go and follow her, read her book. It's a great summer read. Take it to the beach with you. It's called The Sicilian Inheritance. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks. Bye.